Facebook series highlighting unlocking hidden potential. Today's topic is inclusive leadership. My name is Kayla Curry, and I'm the marketing coordinator at Infinite Business Strategies. And we just had our guest log on here, who is the Director of Advancement and Corporate Relations at the University of Missouri Columbia, Mr. Lathon Ferguson. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be fantastic.
Sure. As you mentioned, I'm Lathon Ferguson. Currently work for the University of Missouri Columbia as a director of corporate relations in the advancement office. Um, have a background, been in corporate America for over 20 years. Have a background in senior leadership, sales, operations, diversity and inclusion, and product development. Happy to be here.
We are glad that you are here. I know you have a lot of insight to give us today. All right, let's go ahead and jump into our first question here. Can you just explain what is inclusive leadership and why is it important?
Sure. Inclusive leadership is really people oriented. Inclusive leadership is about having individuals, having leaders that are, again, people oriented, that are great leaders, that are able to tap into the talents and the motivations of their teams. They're an individual they display characteristics of their patient, their understanding, and they're genuinely interested in others. And the reason why inclusive leadership is important. I was actually recently reading a Harvard Business Review, and the research actually shows that, what a leader says, but even more importantly, what a leader does makes up to a 70% difference as to whether the individuals working for them feels included. And so when you have a team that is included, that feels that they're included, then they're more productive, they're more innovative, and from a bottom line standpoint, it just enhances the bottom line.
Yes, and you did mention being an inclusive leader means that you're able to tap into the skills of your team. What does that look like? How can a leader make everyone on their team feel valued or pull out skills that they didn't know they had?
They can do that by honestly taking the time to be personable and understanding the strengths and the skill set of everyone that reports to them, right? Because it's not a cookie cutter. So everyone's going to be a little bit different. But as an inclusive leader, as a leader, it's your job to understand um, um, how to maximize each person's potential, right? And that's going to look a little bit different. You're going to have some people that are more gung-ho, more outgoing, more robust, and it's easy to get those individuals because they kind of self-identify. It's the voices you don't hear. It's the individuals that don't say anything. It's the people that sit quiet in the room that you have to pull ideas out of and get them to talk. And then once you understand where their strengths are, then you got to leverage those strengths and encourage them to use those strengths.
Can inclusive leadership be taught to a leader? How can you go about gaining the skills necessary to become an inclusive leader?
Sure. Inclusive leadership, a lot of people think about inclusive leadership as being, these grand gestures, right? Something that you do and you get all of the recognition. And really, inclusive leadership is about the regular, small scale, consistent actions of a leader that you do. And so when you think about can it be taught, again, some of the research has shown and you can look this up, it was in another Harvard Business Review, but it says that there are truly six core traits of an inclusive leader, and these traits can be taught, right? So whether it's commitment, whether it's humility, whether it's awareness of your bias, and awareness of bias means awareness of your personal bias, but also being aware of organizational biases and systems that are created, and then working towards eliminating those biases, being curious about others. So again, establishing genuine relationships with others around you, having a level of cultural intelligence, and really being a collaborator at your core, right? An inclusive leader doesn't seek to be the smartest person in the room. They seek to fill the room with all smart people, right? So they're collaborative and they look to collaborate whenever possible. An inclusive leader doesn't look to take all the credit, but how can I develop my people and position them to get the credit, for them to continue to grow?
Exactly. You brought up a really good point there in saying that being in that leadership position doesn't mean that you are aiming for the credit, but you're looking for ways to give your team credit as well. What does that look like? How can someone know that, okay, it's time for me to pull out the potential in my team, and how can I help them to really speak up if they are that quiet person in the room?
Sure. I tell my team, so people that report to me, my job is to get you promoted, right? If I haven't gotten you promoted in 3 to 5 years, I am not doing my job as a leader. So when you talk about how as a leader do you pull that out? Whenever I'm in a room and I represent my team, but I have an idea that came up, I don't pass that idea off as my own, right? I bring in the individual that gave me the idea and I assign them to that project to help allow them to be visible to those that may otherwise not have seen them or not know what they do. So from a leader, from an inclusive leadership standpoint, I think that's very important, right? I mean, to be able to speak on behalf of others when they're not in the room, to promote them in terms of their work, their brand, their ability, the things that they can do, the great ideas, and then guide them and allow them the opportunity to generate and execute on those ideas, right? Because there was a quote that I heard that said, the most innovative idea is the one you haven't heard, right? So the person that's not speaking, the person that's not in the room, or that's not in the room speaking. They may be in the room, but they're not speaking. That's the idea you want to hear.
Right. That's awesome. That a lot of people don't think about that quiet person in the room that may have so much to give. And so how do you think inclusivity can benefit an organization?
So when you get to inclusivity, it's one of the conversations that we talk about now. You talk about a lot about diversity and inclusion and equity, but the thing about inclusivity and inclusiveness is that you can be inclusive regardless of what your team makeup looks like, right? And when you're inclusive, all those other things fall into line because from a productivity standpoint, from a bottom line standpoint, inclusion is imperative, is a business imperative, and so when you are more inclusive, you generate more. So recently, and I'll give you a quick story. Recently, I read a story about which I didn't know. Flamin' Hot Cheetos was developed by a janitor at Frito-Lay, right? And so
Wow.
the CEO was doing wanted to maybe walk his talk, right? So he didn't want to just be words. So he said for everyone that worked at Frito-Lay to act like an owner. And this individual saw that and recognized that Frito-Lay was missing an entire demographic from the Latino population. And so it didn't represent their taste. And so this individual reached out, called the CEO, shared his idea, was invited to present it, and here we are years later. It's a $300 million product for Frito-Lay, right? That's what inclusion gets you. That's what allows you to be a best-in-class organization is when you actually walk the walk and include everyone, because that's where you get the innovative ideas at.
That's a very powerful story. I never knew that about Cheetos or Frito-Lay, so that's
Yeah,
very
they're
cool.
flaming hot
Um,
Cheetos. It came from a janitor.
I have some downstairs. What do you think? So those were benefits of inclusivity, but what do you think the consequences are for an organization that feels inclusivity may not be as important? Do you think there are consequences for that?
Yeah, I do. And so again, so from a bottom line standpoint, right? Because from a business standpoint, and I keep talking about that, but from a business standpoint, that's what it converts to, right? What does it mean for our organization? What does it mean for our bottom line? And how is it going to impact us in terms of being a best in class organization? And so for organizations that ignore inclusive environments, it has an impact on their ability to retain top talent, right? Not just diverse talent, but overall top talent. And so when you are losing your top talent, then that means you have a cost of acquisition. So you have to go out and hire new individuals, cost of productivity, cost of training, benefits, all of those things factor into an organization's bottom line. And so if you're not inclusive, if you don't have a culture where people feel like they belong, they're going to leave. right? People don't leave organizations, people leave people. And so if you are not, from an organizational standpoint, implementing the importance of having an inclusive culture, then you're going to lose some of that top talent, which again could be that next innovative idea that's going to go to the competition or somewhere else and give their all because they're made to feel like they belong.
Absolutely. I think it's very interesting you bring up the point of retaining talent because we definitely live in an age where employees want to feel valued at their job. They want to feel like their ideas are being heard. So that's a very good point. And considering that's the stage that we're living in right now, how do you think moving forward past 2020, how important is inclusivity 10 years, 15 years down the road from now?
Wow. You know, I won't say it's the number one thing, but it's going to be very important because as we're seeing in 2020, um, you know, we're going to have to approach life, business, relationships, interactions, everything differently. And so, in order to be able to do that, we have to surround ourselves with individuals that think different than us, right? That have different life experiences, because that's how we continue to grow and evolve and sustain in general. And so, you know, 10, 20 years from now, that innovative idea that someone wrote on a post-it note, right, could be the foundation of your organization. And so
Mhm.
it's going to be very important that organizations and individuals are inclusive. And part of that inclusion is the ability, and this is a key concept, is the ability to have people around you that disagree with you, right? Or are not always on the same wavelength, but have the ability and have the skill set to be able to communicate across those differences and be effective and impactful. That's what inclusion is going to get you. It's not going to get you a bunch of people or a workforce that all sound or look or think like you. It's around individuals that can understand how do we evolve and how do those differences come together to create um, something beautiful.
Absolutely. That was, you hit the nail right on the head with that one. I think that was an amazing point. And with that, that was actually my last question. So if you have any other closing tips that you'd like to share, we'd love to hear anything.
Wow. So, you know, I would say um, closing or leaving out around inclusion, you know, when you think about what do we move going forward? When you think about the current state of our environment, we have an upcoming election, you have all these different things um, that can be divisive, right? But it's important and it's imperative that we establish strong communicative skills to be able to communicate with individuals that think like us and that think opposite of us, but able to establish common ground on how do we continue to move things forward together, right? Because
Right.
just because we differ, what most people will find if you have a conversation with someone, you have more in common than you have in difference, right? A lot of times we highlight those differences, find those commonalities, find the way to be inclusive and communicate with everyone because everything is a learning opportunity. And when you stay in learning mode and stay in a growth mode, then you know again you naturally create a culture of inclusion, which then you create a culture of respect and belonging, which then you create a culture of productivity.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Ferguson, I'd like to say thank you for joining us on our Let's Talk About It episode. It has been a pleasure talking with you today.
Well, thank you, Kayla. I enjoyed it, and thank you for having me on. And for the viewers watching, I will say this: if they have any doubt or have any questions, they need to take a moment if they're not already doing it, go to Infinite Business Strategies and really understand how, you know, this snippet of this conversation is a part of a much larger piece that can help them from a small business, medium business, or Fortune 500, right? So there's something for everyone. So thank you for having me on today.
No problem. And to our viewers, we'd like to remind you that here at IBS, we believe you don't have to be the expert, you just have to know the expert. So if you need any further help or assistance, feel free to set up a one-on-one free 30-minute consultation, and we can discuss how to help you grow your business from there. We also can offer you to join one of our Turbo Boost workshops live, online, or in person in a city near you. And the links to these are down below in the comments if you need assistance getting to those on the website. You can also have us come out to your facility to a maturity assessment, comparing you to best in class, and do an improvement workshop. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and join us in our next IBS Let's Talk About It series next week. We'll be talking about executive coaching, a very important topic.